See the aristocrat pulling rabbits from his hat. Oh, well, I didn't know it worked like that. Sounds great until you do the math. And now people waking up, poking heads out of their stuff. What an expensive turtle shell. It's probably just as well because I don't want to be the machine powered by the American dream. Now the people want the truth, but the truth it can't be found. Well, it's just an artifact, and it's buried in the ground. And I know I'm to blame. Let's call it by its true name. Well, I never held a gun, but I gave it to your son, and I watched as it lulled him to sleep with the hypnotic hum of the machine. Go ahead and tune me out, cause you got it figured out. You say you don't even watch the news, always giving you the blues. But if it was at your door, the cost of foreign war, tell me, what would you say just then? Hell, you tell me to pretend that we're not the machine powered by the American dream. Here she goes again. There she goes again, speaking her beliefs. Well, it's not just problems here. I've got solutions too. Let's say we turn off the TVs, see if that cures obesity. Then we work with what we got, put it in the pot, and then the teachers get a raise, cause it's time that they got paid. And we legalize the shit, tax the fuck right out of it. Helps hungry people eat. That's alright with me because no, I don't want to be the machine.
Welcome to Best You Discussion, and we hope that you're receiving everything you deserve. You know, there are some things you can do to help us out. You can like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can visit our website at bestyouguru.com. It's that simple. Or you can send us an email. If you have questions, comments, send us an email at bestyouguru@yahoo.com. You can also sign up to receive the blogs from there, and we'll send you a copy of our bi-monthly blog. Tell us what you think. We'd like to hear about it. You know, it is because of you we offer our bi-monthly blogs, our Best You discussions, have our website, our Facebook discussions, and even have our YouTube channel. We depend upon your support. So we ask you to send your donations to either Venmo or via PayPal. If you're going to use Venmo, send it to Venmo at Robin-Shivery. If you prefer to use PayPal, you can send it to bestyouguru@yahoo.com. Our work here is to enlighten you to your authentic identity. We want you to live your inherent greatness. That's what Best You is all about. We believe the inherent greatness that each of us is born with. It's inherent and it's unique. The greatest theft in human history has been the theft of human potential. And we're here to stop that theft the best we know how. We live in economic times that require that you trust more than your employer. You trust more than the financial advisors. You trust more than just the talking heads on TV. And you darn sure better trust more than your brother's friend who knew a guy. In order to live your fullest potential, you must understand the world around you. And that includes the economic world. Understanding financial matters is important to living your fullest potential. If you think money and economic power is important, pay attention. Our topic tonight is GDP and median income. The GDP is an acronym for Gross Domestic Product. It is a total of all services and goods produced in the United States or in any country. But we're going to focus on our country, the United States. You are part of the equation for America's GDP. GDP tells how big the economy is, and sometimes it tells you how fast it's growing. Allow me to give you some perspective on the importance of America's relationship with certain countries if a person considers GDP important. Now, I advise you to take notes, and please do some of your own research. Don't just take my word for it. Research what I'm about to tell you. The U.S. GDP in 2019 was $21.43 trillion. That's in 2019. $21.3 trillion. China was $14.34 trillion. Japan, $4.9 trillion. India was $2.7 trillion. Germany is $3.85 trillion. Now, I tell you all this because it's important. Way down on the list is Russia at $1.5 trillion. The United States is $21.43 trillion and Russia is $1.5 trillion. Italy has a higher GDP than Russia. Now let me fine-tune that and give you greater perspective. Remember, GDP is the total sum of all goods and services. California's GDP is $3.1 trillion. Only the US, China, and Japan rank higher in GDP than California. Texas is $1.7 trillion. New York is $1.7 trillion. So understand this, New York has a higher GDP than Russia. Texas has a higher GDP than Russia. California obviously has a much higher GDP than Russia. The governors of California, Texas, and New York have greater economic responsibilities concerning GDP than Vladimir Putin. But now wait a minute, Harry. How does GDP relate to me, to relate to you on the micro level? GDP is one of the most important business concepts to understand, to grasp, to have some understanding what we're talking about. It has been traditionally used as a measure for economic health of our country. The people have been taught, you and I have been taught to accept GDP as a sign of health. Now, I'm going to provide you some information so you can determine if this is the proper measure of the health of the economy. In February 2020, last year in February, before the impact of the pandemic, the U.S. officially entered a recession. It's important that you understand that. In February 2020, the U.S. officially entered a recession before the coronavirus pandemic. That's before. In the coming years, you may hear a different story from political pundits, but the numbers tell the truth. Your life will be better served if you listen less to the political pundits and the financial forecasters on TV and listen to some truth and some facts and some numbers. February 2020 saw the end to the largest economic expansion in U.S. history. This is important because you must understand the time period and policies put into place that provided the foundation for the largest economic expansion in history. The economic expansion covered 128 months. That's from July 2009 to February 2020. That's over 10 years. So I ask you to comprehend the significance of this time frame. The economic policies, the financial policies, the monetary policies put into place that laid the foundation for that 10-year period. Now, since February 2020, the economy has contracted 31%. The stock market is suffering very little effects from the recession. Thus again, proving, if you'll pay attention, that Main Street and Wall Street are much different. If the economy is important to your voting preferences, if the economy helps determine who you should vote for and what you should vote for, pay attention to the reality and not the propaganda. You pay your bills with money. Propaganda and opinions may make you feel good. They make you pep up, but they don't pay your bills. Wall Street and Main Street do not always agree, and every American should understand what impacts their lives. Stocks tell a different story of our economy than does the GDP. Stocks are more important because they're a discounting measure. They're a different kind of measuring stick because they measure the overall economy, which means they look past the bad news and they look through the good news. Stocks may not reflect good economic news or bad economic news. It reflects, now understand this, the stock market reflects emotions more than money. I'll repeat that. Write that down. The stock market reflects more an emotional appeal than it really does economic appeal. This is important for you to understand. The GDP is informative of the economy, more informative of the economy than it is predictive of the economy. GDP is a lagging indicator. It tells a story, it tells a history of our economy. GDP does not tell about the current state of the economy, nor, now understand this, nor does it tell us where the economy is heading. It is a lagging indicator. It merely tells us where the economy has been. Planning your economic future based on the GDP is like driving a car and only using the rearview mirror. Stocks tell a story of Wall Street. GDP tells the history of Main Street. And you have your own story. The GDP as a macro perspective of the economy and a poor indicator of how well Americans are doing. We must use indices like the median income to determine the prosperity of a capitalistic society. Now, please don't get confused. The median income is not the average. It's smack dab in the center. Look at not what the average American is making, but what the median income of the American is making. Another poor indicator is the job index. The job index is another indicator of little relevance to the condition of Main Street. The number of increases or decreases of jobs is very relevant to industry and the health of industry. But it's a poor indicator of the health of working families. Job indices, understand this, job indices were developed at a time in history where a one-wage earner could support a family of four. That's when that measurement was developed. The job index has decreased in importance and relevance when measuring the health of Americans. But why do we measure it? Because it's tradition. It's what people are comfortable with. If we have more jobs, surely America's doing better. That's not true. Here's some information. Take notes. Here's some information why job numbers are less relevant to the economic well-being of Main Street in our current economy than when the numbers were first developed. From 1973 to 2013, hourly compensation of a typical worker, that's non-production, that's production and non-supervisory, of the typical worker, the hourly compensation rose just 9%. From 1973 to 2013, the hourly compensation rose just 9%, while productivity increased 74%. And we're all taught, in Econ 101, we're taught as productivity increases, so do wages. As you're more productive, your wages increase. That's not true. 1973, 2013, wages rose just 9%. The minimum wage would be $18 per hour today if wages kept up with productivity. And you hear all this talk of $15 an hour? Well, if wages would have rose just along with productivity, if the American workers' productivity equal their wages, the minimum wage would be $18. Workers produce more, but typical workers, their pay lagged far behind. Now, two things stand out from this. First is the rapid growth of the annual wages for the top 1% compared with everybody else. The top 1% wages grew 138%, while the wages of the bottom 90 grew 15%. And second thing, middle class wages stagnated. Middle wage workers, their hourly wage is up 6% since 1979. Low wage workers are down 5% since 1979. While those at the very highest of highs in our economic ladder here saw a raise of 41%. Since the late 1970s, the average total compensation of a large company CEO, their wages, their compensation has grown by more than 900% after adjusting for inflation to more than $15 million per year. While wages for the frontline employees have gone up by only 10%. Since 2010, the top 0.1% of households have taken home on average more than 10% of all incomes in the U.S. 0.1% of households have taken home more than 10% of all income in the United States. 0.1% captured 10% of all income in America, while productivity of the average worker rose 74%. Now, we're told that an increase in productivity will increase wages for workers. While there was a time in our history this is true, this is no longer true. What once was true has lost its significance. And we must understand that what is considered sound economic policy is too often considered and determined, outlined, defined by the wealthy and powerful. The wealthy among us and the most powerful among us tell us what is a good economy. And that's not wrong. It's not right. It's just the way it is. Those who win the war write the history. And those at the very economic top of our society determine what is a sound economy and what is not. We must understand that what is considered sound fiscal policy may not be sound fiscal policy for you and I. Jobs only tell us of how many people are employed, not their median income, not how well they're doing. They only tell us how many people are employed. If we are to understand the health of Americans, we need to look at different indicators, such as median income. If we are to measure our personal economic health, we should look at our debt-to-equity ratio. Now, how often do you really sit down and determine your debt-to-equity ratio? But yet we hear how well the stock market's doing almost daily. But rarely do average Americans look at their debt-to-equity ratio. How often do you look at your savings balance? How much do you really have in savings? Do you have enough to get by for several months if you miss a paycheck? Most Americans don't. However, every day with almost every newscast you hear about how well the stock market's doing. I would ask you to pay as much attention to how much you're saving as you do how well the stock market's doing. We should look at our income. I don't care whether you have a job or not. How much income do you have coming in? That's far more important than the stock market. How much do you have in assets? If you sold everything you had today, would your assets be more than your liabilities? That's what's important. It's not really important in the scheme of things to your livelihood, to your offspring's livelihood, how well Apple stock is doing compared to how well you're doing. How many liabilities do you have? Do you even know how many liabilities you have? The things that take place in our lives, we need to take better attention to. Pay attention to the things on Main Street first. That's where your primary focus should be, on Main Street. How are you doing? Do you have a monthly board meeting where you sit down with members of your family and go with you over your economic health? Chances are the average American discusses the latest football game or the National Football Championship or who won the Super Bowl far more than the economic health of their family. Understand the measures that are relevant to the issues you wish to measure. Millions of Americans have no interest financially in the stock market and their 401ks. Reason being, it's really not that significant to their day-to-day life. Pay attention to the issues that affect your life and not the propaganda out there. How well is Apple or Google, Amazon? How well are they doing? It may or may not be important. But I promise you, your debt to equity ratio is, your income is. Those are the things that are important. You know, part of this is designed because we have a lot of feedback from a series we did last year about finances. And it made us realize it's very hard to live your authentic identity if you have no idea the rules around you, if the rules are stacked against you. So we're here to help you understand that your greatness, you were born with it. And the world in which you live plays an important how much you can bring out of your greatness and live your potential. It's hard to get out of a financial hole if you don't know how to stop digging. It's hard to stop digging if that's all you know how to do. And we're here to help you. Don't forget, Best You is about you. It's about helping you see your greatness and live your potential. I hope you took notes. I hope we had some positive effect on your life today. And don't forget to send your questions and your comments to bestyouguru@yahoo.com. We are here for you. Namaste.